The Epstein files, looking back since the beginning, and you've been a part of talking about this, and DOJ has obviously produced these elements. Do you have regrets about how it's been handled?
There is no credible information. None.
Nothing came out about me other than there was a conspiracy against me.
I was foolish to spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him.
Get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video.
I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure they're fine. Otherwise, it would have been major headlines.
This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever.
I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else.
Following the release of the second batch of Epstein files, one question has been lingering in my mind: why at this particular moment? Right now, our country is grappling with unprecedented challenges like economic instability and political polarization, and trust in institutions because of those reasons is at an all-time low. And then suddenly, in a self-proclaimed act of transparency, these files become public, containing allegations that link the most prominent figures in our society like politicians, business leaders, and celebrities to the most heinous actions that you can possibly commit. And these are serious accusations. They carry the weight of one of the most disturbing scandals involving the elite in recent history. But it's not just what is revealed that matters. It's when it's revealed that raises questions, because timing in situations like this always matters. The timing of events is important, not because the allegations themselves are new. Many people suspected wrongdoing at these levels long before the files surfaced, long before Pizzagate was even a thing. Conspiracy theorists were beating this drum for years online to no avail, but the release of official material that suggests systemic abuse of children, complicity, and cover-ups has a predictable and profound effect on people. It shakes their trust. And history shows us that the erosion of trust is not a neutral event. It always has consequences.
I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength from 75,000 to 125,000 men almost immediately. Additional forces will be needed later, and they will be sent as requested.
And I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
When trust in institutions diminishes, public emotion takes center stage, and fear more than anything else changes how people behave. When people are afraid, the rational becomes emotional. People become more willing to accept trade-offs they might otherwise reject. And I'm speaking of myself here as well. I am not immune to this type of thinking. Rights that once felt non-negotiable, like privacy, free speech, and due process, start to feel optional. And most significantly, the burden of proof shifts. No longer is the government required to justify their expansion of power. Instead, citizens don't oppose it.
Here you see the Reichstag, the German House of Parliament in Berlin, which has been seriously destroyed by fire. Flames are no respecters of persons, and President Hindenburg's own chair was also destroyed. Hitler, now Chancellor, has announced that the fire was the work of communists. In consequence, Germany has been placed under a system of martial law, a decree having been signed which...
We've seen this pattern before. In Germany, 1933, the Reichstag fire created the perception in the country of an immediate internal threat. The cause remains debated, but the impact is clear. Fear made emergency powers seem necessary. Civil liberties like speech, assembly, and privacy were suspended temporarily. But even years after the event, those powers were never fully restored. Germany was already unstable prior to this event, so people were primed to believe enemies existed within. Civil liberties stopped being protections and became liabilities. And all that became true in the minds of civilians because fear clouded judgment and they prescribed more value to safety than freedom. Another example in the same time period is the United States itself. In 1941, after Pearl Harbor, a different kind of fear took hold, but the outcome was similar. Urgency replaced debate, so executive power expanded dramatically, surveillance and censorship became normalized, Japanese Americans were put into internment camps, and most people supported all these policies at the time. Fear simplified moral complexity in the mind of everyday civilians, so reflection only came later once the threat felt distant.
Good evening. American and British forces have begun attacking the Taliban in Afghanistan tonight in a wave of military strikes aimed at crippling their air defense.
We can look ahead to 2001. The 9/11 attacks introduced something new to people. It was a crisis without a clear endpoint, an enemy that could be anywhere. The fear was persistent, so because of that fear, the Patriot Act was passed swiftly. The Patriot Act allowed surveillance to expand, privacy was contracted out to the highest bidder, and new security institutions were created and described as temporary measures. And those measures are still in place to this day. It is important to note, because I know this is going to be the first thing people say, this doesn't require belief in conspiracy theories or mass-scale orchestration. The pattern is observable regardless. A crisis induces fear in the population, and fear produces consent. Consent enables the expansion of authority, and outcomes once set in motion are hard to reverse. Intent, whether deliberate or not, is often impossible to prove, but outcomes are clear. Which brings us all the way back to the Epstein files. The fear here isn't of an external enemy, it's fear that the system itself is illegitimate, that accountability is selective, and that the powers that be protect their own. The files reveal allegations that powerful individuals participated in or facilitated sexual abuse and trafficking. They hint at networks of complicity all the way up to the highest offices of power in our government. These are allegations, but the perception that the elite can act with impunity is enough to fracture trust, and that kind of fear doesn't unify. In such conditions like this, to the average person, stability sounds more appealing. The possibility of unrest, even without actual unrest, can justify surveillance, expanded policing, and preemptive authority. Not because violence is inevitable, but because fear makes this type of preparation seem reasonable. And to play devil's advocate, in the truest sense of that term, there are other reasons for the release. You can talk about legal pressures and court deadlines. Journalistic persistence is one thing. It could be damage control, or perhaps transparency was delayed from us so long that the release, no matter what it contained, would have been destabilizing. And this isn't about claiming that chaos is intentional or orchestrated or fear is orchestrated. What history shows is consistent. Crises are rarely wasted by governments. Power expands most easily when framed as protection. So emergency measures last longest when threats are portrayed as ongoing. And once authority is expanded, it doesn't recede on its own. So the real question isn't whether the moment was deliberately designed, it's what comes next. Does the outrage lead to accountability, or does fear become the justification for further control? If you watched this far, thank you, seriously. I appreciate anyone taking the time out of their day to listen, so drop your comments below, especially if you disagree, and I'll see you in the next one.